I think we've got to the point now we're kind of realising this is a thing. What we do about it exactly, we need to do a little bit more work on, I think. All those little messages we can put across in things like the Right Meeting, for example.
Yeah.
Or when you interact with people, say, on mailing lists or online, you're going to think, okay, well, they've had a bit of a rant, or they might have a very black and white view of something. And that some people, that comes across as quite rude and offensive sometimes. And you're kind of, well, actually, that's just kind of how they are. If people feel comfortable and able to come and chat to me, fine. I can chat for hours.
Diversity is one of the great strengths of the internet community, but making sure different voices are heard and understood as we tackle new problems together calls for careful communication and a willingness to appreciate ways of thinking that, for each of us, can sometimes seem quite different from our own. Earlier this year at RIPE 88, in a session dedicated to diversity, equity and inclusion in tech, Rob Lister, Senior Network Engineer at LONAP, gave a presentation on neurodiversity, where he talked about this stigma that's often still attached to conversations around the topic and highlighted steps the technical community can take to make it easier for neurodiverse individuals to contribute. Speaking for the first time in public about his own experiences as someone who's been diagnosed with ADHD, Rob's talk was as eye-opening and informative as it was touching, and I know that many people in the room got a great deal out of hearing what he had to say. So, to help spread the message further, a few weeks back I caught up with Rob to talk more about neurodiversity and what he learned from talking to the community at RIPE 88. I'm Alan Davies, the RIPE Labs editor, and this is the RIPE Labs podcast. You said that you initially got your diagnosis during COVID.
Yes.
What was it that triggered you to start asking questions and start that process off?
Being shut at home during COVID with my partner, who normally goes to the office, and he sort of would observe my behaviour, sort of randomly walking into the room, forget what I came in there to do, do 3 other things, go away again, and sort of pacing around. And he was sort of looking at, why are you coming here 3 times now? What are you doing? And I was like, is this not... So it's when you've got somebody, you're sort of 24/7 shut up in the house with them, it kind of, those sorts of things start to come out. I think, doesn't everyone do this? And apparently, no. Maybe it's just me. And I had a few other things which made me start to wonder. So my employer encouraged me to go and do an Open University degree. And it's all distance learning, and I really was struggling to get the assignments done on time and to do the work. And they would have this lovely idea. They would make you do this nice timetable of, okay, when are you going to sit down and do the work and do the tutorials, and maybe you do this for 2 hours on a Sunday, and it just wasn't working for me. I just can't seem to stick to these timetables and deadlines, and I was just kind of, and I would just sit up all night, literally the night before the assignment is due in. And it's kind of, well, you have to submit the thing before midnight, and I would submit it at 11:58. And I would usually turn it out and do the work, but it was just like, why am I like this? I know this assignment is due in, I know I have to do the work, but I just can't seem to sit and focus and do it. I would try, sit there staring at the screen, not be able to do anything. And I thought, well, an hour later, I still cannot get my brain into gear. Well, maybe I'll just do everything else except the thing that I'm supposed to be doing, just a kind of distractions or other things. So it did get me wondering, what is this? And I happened to see a documentary a few years ago. You remember Rory Bremner? He did a documentary. I was sitting up late at night, not going to bed. It must have been 3 o'clock in the morning. But this documentary came on, was Rory Bremner, I think it was ADHD and me.
Right.
And it was his experience of getting a diagnosis. And everything they were saying was like, wow, he's just described me. I had this kind of aha moment. It's like, this sounds like something describing me. This could actually be me. And then I, of course, forgot about all that and didn't really pay much attention. And I spent a long time trying to work out if it was sleep problems, for example, because a lot of things look the same as ADHD. If you have enough sleep deprivation, then anyone's going to feel not able to focus, tired, distracted, all those things. So I was trying to rule out things like sleep problems. And eventually I worked out, well, it's not really sleep problems. Let's see if, I can get some help here. So that's what I did. And amazingly enough, I managed in the middle of COVID to get some diagnosis. It took quite a long time, but I got there in the end.
Yeah. And the way that you described that diagnosis, this is fairly unambiguous, right? The way that you described it when you were talking was that they were quite clear.
Yeah, I think in my case it was, so they get you to fill out like a questionnaire beforehand, and they give a very similar questionnaire to people that you know and live with.
Okay.
And say, okay, what is Rob like? Has he? How long have you known him? How has he always been like this? Does he do this? And I fill in a similar questionnaire saying, what are you like? And I kind of ticked quite a lot of the boxes.
Right. Okay.
And it's kind of okay. So, and you sort of add that up and go, okay, if you get a score more than this, then let's look at a diagnosis and see if this is a problem. And they go back into your past and say, okay, when you were a child, what was it like? What was your school like? Did you have problems in school? Did you fit in? What was it like? And based on my experiences in school, in childhood, and they kind of pretty much said, yeah, this is no doubt that it's ADHD. And that was quite a relief, because I was kind of thinking, is it kind of me, or am I making it up? But no, there's absolutely no question. This is what it is. And, if you want the medication or diagnosis, then happy to do it.
That's interesting, because I remember during the talk, I think you had that one slide where you said that, you got diagnosed, and then you had an emoji on the page. It was like a frowny face. It's kind of stuck in my head from watching the talk. When you get that diagnosis, obviously it must be quite a mixed reaction to it, because I imagine it makes you kind of worried, or is it more of a relief at that moment, because you can then go and say, okay, now I know what this is.
Yeah,
and I
kind of think it was an initial kind of, what now? But I think in my case, because I was diagnosed very late, in my 40s,
right?
And there's a flood of people coming out now in their 30s, 40s, kind of my age, adults getting diagnosed with ADHD. So now there's just more information out there. People are more aware of it. So they're going out and getting a diagnosis. There's more realization that this is a thing in adults. So they're like, no, this is totally it. So get diagnosed quite late as an adult. There was an initial feeling of like, well, oh my God, all that time I've been living like this. And when you think of all the things that have gone wrong for me, and all the opportunities that I've missed, and all the stuff that you could go back and sort of regret it, and you kind of think, well, I can't change the past, but now we know what it is, and the kind of good news is, in a lot of cases, the medication does actually help, and in my case, it helps. Okay. So it's kind of, this is actually, you got the diagnosis, that's good, and let's try the next steps. Let's try the medication. Let's do some things to see how it affects me. And if the medication helps, and plan out, how to manage this. And also, there's very good positive bits, which you don't even realize. But you kind of think, wow, this is a way of thinking. When I do get that ability to focus and that way of thinking, when they diagnosed me, they said, this is actually quite good. You lean into the positive traits of this. This is how your brain works, and you have to learn to drive this particular vehicle, make the best of it, work how you want to work, and try and manage the less positive traits.
During the talk, you went through quite a lot of symptoms. I remember at one point, right at the start, you asked the room how many of you have an internal monologue. And I was quite surprised at how many people don't.
And this is actually a thing. And they've done some more research into this, that, what is it like being someone that doesn't have that internal voice, a little internal monologue? How do they exist in the world, and how do they think? And but to me, that was quite, when you first hear about that, you kind of think, what? I've always had this little internal monologue in my brain, but some people don't. And you kind of think, well, that's an example of, like, not everybody thinks the same way I do. Not everyone's brain works in the same way.
Is it quite intrusive?
It can be quite distracting.
Right, okay.
And this is the cause of because I'm always thinking about something else or a couple of other things, and it's just some random thoughts. Just I'll see that plug socket over there and go, I wonder how that's cabled. I wonder what. And this is going on in my brain. Or I'll see this light over there and go, oh, that's a nice light. So there's just everything is just going through my head all of the time. When you're trying to actually remember why you came into the room, I came to get a cup of coffee.
Yeah.
You kind of forget. So you do get distracted. You have to make a conscious effort.
And what are some of the other symptoms that you think, like, I'm going to get in a moment, I'm going to point out to people coming up to you around meeting saying, oh, me too, and things like that. But so what are the other things that when you've talked about this, people have kind of identified with?
Some people have more of the hyperactive side of it. Some people don't get that hyperactive. In my case, I sit and jiggle, move about, and some people don't have that. And some people get this rejection sensitivity, so they don't really take to criticism well, or even the thought of criticism, they don't react to it. They can be very sort of mood swings, that sort of thing. I, in particular, had quite bad sort of paranoid thoughts a lot of the time. I'll be sitting in the office and a bunch of managers or some people would go into a meeting room and I would see through, and I'm like, they're in there, they're talking about me. What's happening? They must be talking about, they could be talking about where they're going to go for lunch, but my brain has already gone down this paranoid thinking of, okay, this is what's happening. This is what, I'm doomed. I'm not good enough. And that's
Sure.
It's never the case, but I would have all these thoughts. That was really hard. And sometimes replying to an email, maybe you don't agree, then I was, and I was learning how to stop myself having that kind of reaction and then go, no, it's not really this.
Yeah.
You're doing this kind of thing again where you sort of get that sort of paranoia. And that was another thing for me. The medication just completely made all that go away.
Wow.
So I'm just much more I'm much more balanced when I'm thinking about things. Oh no, actually they probably didn't mean
Sure.
So it's very noticeable. And there's a lot of things like that are kind of all the interplay for different people. There's some sort of communication issues there as well, because we're not very concise a lot of the time. I love to give a bit of a backstory and go off on 3 tangents and tell you all the stuff I think you want to know. And people are, will you just get to the point? And I like that, but some people find that really annoying. So will you just... I don't need to know all this. Just tell me the answer to... I'm like, oh, sorry. But yeah, so learning to try to be a bit concise and not send long emails, and there's a lot of sort of things out there where you can actually learn that skill of being a bit more thoughtful in that communication and how talk in a way that's nice and concise, that's not annoying. They don't need all of the background. If they want all the information, they'll ask me.
Sure. Yeah.
So learning to do that, not easy. I don't find that easy, but get there.
In the talk you had on one of your slides, you were talking about the Model B brain. I understand this is a different wiring, right? Like a different reaction to stimulus, basically. So
I think it's just that kind of assumption that everybody thinks the same way I do. Everyone's thought process and way of being, their brain works in the same way I do. I was kind of shocked, doesn't everyone have these? Is everyone's brain like this? And apparently not. There are other models of brain out there, people with autism, ADHD, people with this inner monologue, no inner monologue, which is, to me, quite strange, but just being aware that there are other models. You might have a model A, you might have a model B as well. All of these are fine. It's just kind of having a bit of awareness that not everybody is going to have your exact model. There are other model brains out there, and we need to kind of be a bit more aware of that.
At the meeting when you gave the talk, the room just stood up afterwards. Everybody took to the mics. Overwhelmingly positive response from the room, I think.
I was a little bit unsure when I did it. I thought, well, I'll do it in this little diversity session at the end of the day when people are going out to the dinner, and I thought it'll be a bit quiet, and there won't be that many people around. So I don't know what reaction I'm going to get. I knew I was going to get maybe some sort of reaction, but I was just amazed by what happened next. And people just And actually, some of it was quite funny.
Yeah.
When I was doing the presentation, I could see people, they had that little, oh yeah, me too moment. I do this. And it was just, people sort of now being a little bit more like, oh yeah, thank you for speaking out about this and for bringing this up, because we needed to talk about it and for people to sort of feel a bit more confident that they can talk about it a bit more openly. A lot of comments were, why isn't this in the main plenary session? And I was like, good point. I don't know if I was brave enough to do it then. And I was getting emails, and at the dinner afterwards and the next day, people were sort of reaching out to me, talking about the positive sides of it more than the negative sides of it.
Yeah.
Like, oh yeah.
It does seem to be a community that's pretty accepting.
We've got some work to do to build a bit more understanding, to put some messages out there, especially at the things like the Right meeting, for example, about, there are people that give me a little bit more time to think about this, or what can we do to kind of help the communication aspects, especially messages we can put out there. So I'm not doing this to be deliberately annoying. And if I'm annoying, oops, I'm sorry, but just kind of say, oh, you know what? It's okay, and it's fine. So just putting those little messages out there. I need a little bit more time. I need a little bit of quiet space. It's not you. I'm just peopled out. I love the idea of the social battery, little badges people have got. To say, look, I've just peopled out now. I'm done with this. I need to just go and sit in a quiet room for a bit, because having to make a conscious effort how you are communicating, how you're talking. Small talk doesn't come naturally. You don't necessarily pick up on those sort of unwritten cues in a social setting or something like a conference or whatever. You have to sort of interact with people, but every time you're having to make a conscious effort to kind of fit in and to communicate and to do the small talk, and it doesn't come naturally, but that gets exhausting. After a whole evening of that, you think, oh, I'm done. I just need to go and lie down. So all those little messages we can put across in things like the Right meeting, for example. Or when you interact with people, say on mailing lists or online, you're going to think, okay, well, they've had a bit of a rant, or they might have a very black and white view of something, and that some people that comes across as quite rude and offensive sometimes. And you're kind of, well, actually, that's just kind of how they are. And we all have to kind of work together. So those kind of things I think we could work on, definitely.
And do you think it is getting better? Because I think even since COVID, there has been slightly more attention to this.
When the restrictions were kind of eased a little bit, it's like, okay, if you want to wear a mask, wear a mask. If you don't, So it gave a lot of people that understanding of, okay, well, I feel fine not wearing a mask, but there's other people there that do want to do that. So it made everyone start thinking about, in terms of what their own perspective and their own thoughts on it were. But it then it was a very visible thing. Oh, actually, this person they're not the same as me. They are wearing a mask, or they want to keep their distance, or whatever. So it was a very visible way of kind of thinking, we're all on different levels here of what we think is a sort of acceptable risk for COVID, and maybe we've got other illnesses or whatever that kind of complicate that. It was a very visible thing for everyone to go through. And maybe that's carried on a bit in terms of other disabilities or things like ADHD and neurodiversity, where people are a bit more mindful of, actually, no, maybe this is not the same for this person as it is for me. I think we've got to the point now we're kind of realising this is a thing. What we do about it exactly, we need to do a little bit more work on, I think, so that we can not react. But I think if we can do a little bit more work as a community to kind of recognise this is a thing, because, Right meetings has done brilliant things to try to improve accessibility, for example, and inclusion, and to go one step further and say, well, actually, there's this neurodiversity. What would be something that the Right meetings, for example, can do to kind of help people out and make life a little bit easier?
One thing that really should be said is that at the Right meeting, and also today, you're an extremely good spokesperson for this stuff. I thought at the talk of the Right meeting in particular, you made the point in this very clear, concise, but also it was very easy to like connect with what you were saying, like emotionally, and you explained it so well. Have you got plans to do more of this?
Definitely. It's something that if people feel comfortable and able to come and chat to me, fine. I can chat for hours. But cool. People told me their sort of experiences of what they've been through, and I just had lots of really lovely conversations with people say, "Oh God, this is it. I've always thought this." I got a lot of those, "Oh, this is totally me," or this, I'm not sure, but now you maybe wonder whether this is me. I don't know, and I can kind of say, "Well, this is what I went through. It's going to be different for you, but don't panic because you're on a journey, right? And you can take your time. There's no massive rush to go and do all the things. But it's like, definitely you think about it, chat to people, do what I did, kind of read up a bit on it, and you kind of, this could be it. But I'm happy to chat to people. I'm not a medical person, but I'll definitely have to sort of share my experience, especially sort of as it relates to things like communication. Why do I always struggle to join in the conversation? Why do people talk over me? And all of those things, you kind of think, well, there's an explanation for this.
No, thanks a lot there, Rob. I think it was a great talk at the last RITE meeting. I think this was very helpful. Hopefully we'll see you at other RITE meetings.
It's been a pleasure. We'll do it again sometime.
That's our episode. I'd like to give a last big thank you to Rob for dropping by on his way through Amsterdam to come talk to us. I really hope this helped you in some way, and I hope you'll join us again for our next episode of the RITE Labs podcast.